Salvaging from derelicts had always been the bottom of the pick on Evelyn's list of preferred jobs. Despite wearing her call sign Packrat with pride, she never seemed to be able to properly equip herself for this kind of tedious work. But today, she didn't mind the gig that would keep her in poverty. Because today, she found a new friend snoozing below the E-drive of the abandoned ship, Kuno's hammer. A glowing, frog-like thing that must have converted the specialised energy into a nice drink for itself, of which the greedy little fella must have consumed too much. It would be unwise to bring this life form along, Evelyn thought. But then again, she didn't feel like she had a choice. Hello, and welcome to The Bad Spot, an actual play podcast where I, Matt Risby, and I alone am playing through Ironsworn Starforged. And it's been a good while, hasn't it? With Starforged out now, I took the opportunity to put out some how-to content for all the new players that are joining the community, and whilst this was only supposed to take a couple of weeks, it ended up taking 7, but hey-ho. Anyway, I am pleased to say that the campaign is finally back. This week's Tale from the Drift was from a contributor known only as Brushmen, and I want to thank him for turning in this tight, lean little piece of fiction which featured a sleepy little alien frog, and who doesn't love those, right? If you want to roll some dice and write something for me to read at the beginning of a future episode, then the submission guidelines and contact details are on screen now. And whilst I have you, why don't you leave a like, subscribe, and click the little bell icon so you can follow along with the campaign each and every week. These things are really important for supporting the channel and supporting what I do. And if you really want to support the channel, then why not check out the Bad Spot Patreon? There you can get early access to all episodes, exclusive behind-the-scenes videos, and your name on screen, like these lovely people. Last time out, if you can cast your minds back that far, Archer, Luna and Griff are leading the remnants of Cole's crew across a treacherous stretch of wild space known as the Spine of Kronos. They encounter several horrifying sights as they cross this wretched place, including a relay beacon warped into the form of a petrified human face, and an abandoned courier ship whose crew have met a painful, grisly end. Archer and Luna use the time it takes for the E-drive to recharge to search the courier ship, recovering some basic supplies, in addition to several databanks full of information. Their search is interrupted by a huge, unseen horror approaching through the murky dust clouds. The Eclipse manages to make the jump into the drift at the very last second, as whatever it is bears down on them. Fraught and wired by the near miss and the horrific scenes they have witnessed, the crew are relieved to find themselves in what appears to be the relative safety of a ship graveyard. They set down in the remains of a large carrier whilst they recharge and rest. However, Archer cannot relax, and as he is wiping the databanks recovered from the courier ship, he discovers transmissions sent between dozens of scavengers and grubs. All the information seems to suggest one thing: that somewhere deep in the spine of Kronos, there is an ancient Precursor Vault. So, that all seems like a long time ago, doesn't it? So long ago that I almost forgot I got sent another piece of wonderful fan art from Running Critter 1, this time depicting the beacon that welcomed our heroes to this dreadful place. And I'm sure you'll agree that, once again, it's pretty cool. Huge thanks for taking the time to share your interpretation of the story with us. I am constantly blown away by how good this community is and how creative they are with how they interpret things, their Tales from the Drift, the fan art, everything. I love it, so keep it coming. But anyway, back to this story, back to the campaign. What is happening? Well, before we get into that, Professor Zari Darwin sits pondering the information on the screen. She looks intently at the endless rows of green numbers against the black, which reflects her tired expression right back at her. After a moment lost deep in thought, her junior researcher, Archer Barlow, appears in the reflection, leaning idly in the research bay doorway behind her. Fresh-faced and clean-shaven, in stark contrast to her wired appearance. He approaches slowly and puts a steaming hot cup of coffee on the desk in front of her. He takes a look at the screen and says, "Still on this, huh?" The professor rubs her knuckles into her eyes, trying to bring this seemingly infinite series of numbers into some kind of focus to have it make some kind of sense. And Archer continues, "You've checked it. I've checked it. Griff has checked it. You need to accept that it is just some old list of incorrect coordinates, corrupted navigational data. That's all it is." And she nods her head softly, not taking her gaze from the screen. And Archer can tell that she's not really listening to him. And he says, "Anyway, we're about to drop if you care to join us." She nods again. Archer takes one last look at the screen and says, "Professor, let it go." And he leaves. The professor takes a sip of her coffee and one last look at the list of incorrect coordinates, an endless slew of directions, a map leading to nowhere. She fingers the black iron compass that hangs around her neck and says quietly to herself, "If only I could." And we're back in the present. So, what's happening? Well, Archer has discovered that there is a very strong chance that there is a Precursor Vault somewhere in this place, and that's important to him. It is sort of tied in quite heavily to the work that he and the professor were doing. Their pursuit of ancient technology and civilization took them right across the Forge, and it's part of that work that led them to discovering the Iron Gate. The Iron Gate that Professor Darwin disappeared through without a trace more than a decade ago. And that Iron Gate was part of an Iron Gate network that Archer is now attuned to. So a Precursor Vault being here is super, super relevant to Archer's interests. But it is also not super relevant to the scared, frazzled crew that he is leading across this dangerous, terrifying stretch of wild space. They want to get out of the other side as quickly as possible. They've seen a beacon morphed into a twisted, horrifying face. The crew of a courier ship literally turned inside out. And they've also been set upon by something big and horrible. For now, they are in relative safety, but they are by no means anywhere near being out of this place. So they could be forgiven for not wanting to indulge the whims of Archer Barlow. So why is Archer set on doing this? Well, he feels, and he can't explain how he feels it, that the Precursor Vault is part of the Iron Gate network. It just has to be. And he feels this instinctively. And unlike him, he knows that this is how he's been making a lot of decisions since activating the gate at Paxton Hold, since turning it on and stepping through it. Everything has been different. He's different. He's connected somehow to some ancient energy. He's kind of attuned to its mystical vibrations. He feels like this kind of conductor, a dowsing rod, divining the source of this energy. But he is also a man of science, right? He knows that dowsing is nonsense. But he also can't explain how or why, but he feels like he's being pulled, being drawn by some cosmic magnet towards a great source of power. And he figures instinctively that that source of power must be this Precursor Vault. Now, he and the professor found many Precursor artifacts and excavated many Precursor sites, but they never found a vault. These things are incredibly rare. And I think in their past relationship, it was the professor who was driving them towards all this Precursor stuff, whilst Archer was the skeptic in the relationship. Archer was the voice of reason. But now, here we are. Archer is standing before Luna, Cole, and the surviving members of his crew, and he is very much going to have to plead his case. And that case is to convince them to divert from this voyage across incredibly treacherous terrain and treacherous territory to what boils down to essentially doing some archaeology. And I think that just looking in on this scene, people's feelings are clear, right? Cole is totally against this idea, totally opposed to it, and his crew are in much the same boat. And I think Luna, who is, to put it politely, someone who has been prone to making the odd rash decision herself in the past, I think she's certainly torn. I don't even think she's like on the fence. I think that she's kind of got 1 foot more in Cole's camp, leaning towards the way he's thinking. But what ties them all together is that they all trust Archer. Somehow, he has got them all this far. But Luna has also seen how Archer has changed since Paxton Hold. She has absolute trust in him, but this seems like a very, very bad idea. So what is Archer going to do to convince them? What is his angle? Well, I think we join this scene in the cockpit, and he's already laid out what he wants to do. He's already told them everything about the vault and what he wants to do. He wants to go there, and he wants to explore inside. But now he needs a reason, and it better be a good one. So, Archer stands before the others, and they are set apart. Archer is stood on one side of the cockpit, the others on the opposite. He is this lone voice arguing for an incredibly dangerous, incredibly reckless course of action. And he says, I can't explain it, but I just know that if there is a vault here and we can get inside it, we can access the network. And if we can do that, we can get out of here instantaneously. And Cole kind of raises a skeptical eyebrow and says, and end up where exactly? And Archer says, I don't know. Cole says, I'm sorry. And Archer says, I don't know. Cole says, great. But then Archer continues. He says, if we can find this thing, if we can access it, if we can find our way through, if we can... Luna cuts him off and says, it's a lot of ifs, Archer. Cole says, it is. And anyway, how do you even hope to find it in this place? And that's when Archer pulls out one of those databanks he retrieved from the courier ship, and he moves across the cockpit. He takes a cable out and hooks it up to Griff. Just bring it up for me, will you please? I know you have, but I'd like to see it again. And I think Griff, He kind of starts to flicker and whir, and lights come on the side of his chassis, and after a moment, the screens in the cockpit fill with columns of green numbers, coordinates. So since I've been on this break, one of the things I've been doing is revisiting a few things. And one of the things I revisited was my session 0. And do you know what came up in that session 0 that I have never touched on? Well, when I was coming up with details for my spaceship, the Eclipse, I rolled one descriptive detail and I picked another. And the detail I picked was: navigation logs contain coordinates to locations that do not or should not exist. Well, what if now those coordinates suddenly make sense? In here, in this place, those coordinates, that map to nowhere, actually points to somewhere. Now, there are lots and lots of coordinates listed here, and the professor was obsessed with these. It drove her to the point of distraction, but they never made sense. But she knew they meant something, and Archer has just figured it out. As Griff is working busily away, the columns of green numbers scroll quickly down the screen for a minute or two, and there are lots and lots and lots of numbers, and they have been checked and double-checked before. They do not exist. But then... there, the scrolling stops, and a glowing dot appears on the navigation readout, and it matches one of the coordinates. And Archer says, "There." The others lean in to look. He says, "These places don't exist anywhere. We checked. We checked with every astrolabe in the terminus. Nothing. They lead nowhere." And he points at the glowing green dot. Now, the professor clearly thought they meant something, even if she never told me what. And now they suddenly point somewhere. And I'll bet that if there is a vault here, that is what they are pointing at. And Cole, who is thinking this over, just says, "I don't know." And Archer says, "I don't know how long we'll be trying to cross the spine. I have no idea where we are, or how many jumps it'll take to come out the other side. None of us do. We are operating on blind faith." And he points again to the navigational readout and says, "Now we have at least some direction in which to head. If it takes us to the vault, I'm certain there will also be a gate there." And Cole says, "And if it doesn't?" And Archer replies, "Then it's no different to just jumping randomly until we come out of the other side." And I think we are going to trigger our first move here, and I think that move is going to be Compel. Compel says, when you try to persuade someone or make them an offer, envision your approach. And then it gives you some options. And I don't think, looking at them, we're not lying. So that rules out Shadow. We're not threatening them, which rules out Iron. Charm, Pacify, Encourage, or Barter doesn't seem exactly right, but I'm certainly appealing to the group's good nature. So I think that rolling plus Heart seems appropriate. A weak hit. Okay, the move says, on a strong hit, they'll do what you want or agree to your conditions, take +1 momentum. On a weak hit, as above, but their agreement comes with a demand or complication. Envision their counter offer. So, we'll take the +1 momentum. Very nice, very helpful, almost up to full. So, what is this counter offer? Personally, I think that the counter offer is pretty straightforward. And I think that they can see some value in it, and the fact that he's made the argument that they are essentially at the moment flying blind, I think that Cole would probably accept something like, maybe if we don't find this thing in like 2 jumps or something, then we abandon the search. I think that Cole argues that if they don't and they continue jumping to try and find the vault, they could just lose themselves completely if they are kind of constantly diverting to look for this thing. And I think it kind of makes sense because they are flying blind, but not kind of 100%. Like, they roughly know how big the spine is, how much space it takes up, and they can roughly calculate how far they've traveled with every jump. So it's actually less a case of flying aimlessly. It's more a case of knowing roughly how far they have to go and crossing their fingers and hoping for the best. And I think Archer has to agree to these conditions. He has to accept that because he knows that deep down that is the right thing to do. And if he was in Cole's shoes, he would probably do the same. So I think we're not going to waste a minute more debating this. Archer wants to get going right away. And I think that is exactly what's happening. And Cole and the others kind of reluctantly get back to their stations, and Luna watches Archer as he goes about kind of setting a course. She's, I think, still dubious, but at least it's something to have a fixed point to travel towards, and they have just as much of an idea of what they will find there as jumping randomly through the dust. So she's kind of happier with this than she was before. And down the corridor towards the cargo hold, she can hear the drakes whimpering now, whining. They're no longer honking and cawing. They're tired and hungry and distressed, the poor things. And Archer gives the order, and the Eclipse lifts up, moving slowly through the dust and through the skeletal frames of the burnt-out spaceships in this massive, massive graveyard. It is deathly quiet. This was a place of relative safety, and they are about to leave, heading towards the unknown, albeit a slightly different unknown. Now I'm gonna bend the rules a bit here, I think, or maybe even stop to have a pause about rules in general. And I know that will shock regular viewers, I know. But we've got a situation here where the move, if you know where you're going, would be set a course. But we're actually mid-expedition. So what do we do? You could make the argument that we are diverting from an expedition. So you could make the move, explore a waypoint. But we are not actually at that waypoint yet. The waypoint would be the vault. And whilst we have these coordinates, we are still crossing a great deal of treacherous unknown space to reach it. So can you set a course within an expedition? Now I have these directions, should I just bump it down a rank? Frankly, I have no idea. But the solution I've come up with is that I'm going to continue with my expedition, because I consider this still to be trailblazing a route through perilous space, even though we now have a specific destination. When I say specific, I mean like specific-ish. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say that because we are now moving in some kind of set direction, we know roughly where we're heading, we can perhaps be slightly more prepared than when we made the last jump. So I'm going to reflect that narrative development mechanically by making the move secure an advantage. Secure advantage says when you assess a situation, make preparations, or attempt to gain leverage, envision your action and roll. And we are making preparations this time rather than just pointing the ship in a direction and hoping for the best. So I think this is going to be using focus or observation because we are using new information that we have to give us an endpoint. So we're going to be rolling plus wits. A weak hit. On a hit, you succeed. On a strong hit, take both. On a weak hit, choose one of these. And I think that's a very fair way of tying this narrative development to the mechanics. And I will take +1 on the next move, because we are slightly more prepared to make the next jump. So Archer looks intently at the coordinates as Cole punches them into the E-drive. And the whole cockpit shares an apprehensive look as Cole plunges the handle forward, sparking the E-drive into action. For the first time in a while, the Eclipse shudders and shakes as the viewport fills with colour, and the drab, dust-filled space outside becomes a maelstrom of red and purple. and the ship launches into the drift. So we're going to make the move undertake an expedition, and we'll be doing so at speed because Archer does not want to hang about. So we will be undertaking expedition, rolling plus edge with a +1 from our secure and advantage. A strong hit. On a strong hit, you reach a waypoint, envision the location, and mark progress per the rank of the expedition. So that's good. We are up to 4 out of 10 now on our expedition, but we now need to envision the waypoint. So what I'm going to do is I am going to roll on the Oracle and see if we can come up with something interesting. 34 is foe inadvertently reveals themselves or tips their hand. Okay. I think I know what we can do with this. Let's return to those rumours, the rumours that we heard about this place. And I think that one of them that we've not used yet was pirates hunt for prey. What if we discover what has become of the pirates that have made this place their base of operations? Because it was just a rumour, right? We've seen how inhospitable this place is. So why don't we use this opportunity to perhaps put that rumour to bed? Because I think that pirates might be interested if they found out there was a Precursor Vault in here. I think that maybe there was some enterprising pirate crew that might have made a good living preying on grubs and scavengers who were kind of trying their luck, trying to cross the spine. But maybe after a while, I think these pirates, they might learn what riches there are in here, what is bringing these grubs to this stretch of wild space. And maybe after they've learned that, they figure, why don't we get a piece of it for ourselves? And I think we're going to discover now just how far they got. So, let's envision this. The eclipse drops out of the drift, and immediately the proximity alarms are screaming, they're kind of blaring. The viewport is filled with dust once again. But in a second, the ship breaks through that dust and is immediately confronted with the unmistakable form of a drift pirate galleon. And they only have a split second, right, to kind of take that in, because they're going to crash right into this thing. So Cole's crewmate, the one who is at the helm, plunges the yoke straight down, and the eclipse dives, causing everyone to cling on for dear life as they hear the hull scraping against the underside of the galleon. More sensors start to beep and alarms start to flare as pieces of debris and detritus bounce off the eclipse's flanks. Luna kind of moves over to the weapons station and warms up the surge blasters for all the good they'll do against this pirate vessel. And Archer pulls himself across the cockpit to get a good look as the eclipse spins round to look at how much trouble they're in. But looking at it from the side, he can suddenly see that only the prow of this ship exists. This thing is, or I should say was, huge, and half of it is gone. The rest of the crew ease down as they see it too. The back half of this ship, the likes of which many of them will know all too well, has gone. It is just gone. It's not anywhere around here. It just isn't there. The cut is clean. The back half has disappeared. Whatever did it was very powerful and very big. And I think we're going to have to go in for a closer look, right? We can't resist this. I think Archer motions to bring the eclipse round and swing it up to the backside of the galleon because he wants to have kind of like a decent look up close. And Cole is kind of being cautious, as you know, he seems to be the cautious one these days, and he's kind of monitoring the scanners, and there's nothing else around, nothing showing on it. Certainly nothing close enough to ping on the screen. They have a short wait to pass as the E-drive is charged, so why not? We're going to cautiously approach this thing and see what we can see. So we're going to make a move, and that move is going to be explore a waypoint. which says, when you divert from an expedition to examine a notable location, roll plus wits. Another strong hit. Very nice. So on a strong hit, we get to choose one. We can find an opportunity, which is envision a favourable insight, situation, resource, or encounter, then take +2 momentum. Or we can gain progress, and we can mark progress on our expedition per its rank. I think we're going to have a little look around, but I don't want to get hung up here, so I think we will just take the progress, and that bumps us up to 5. So halfway through this expedition. And I think that narratively, I think that this is going to mean, it's going to represent that the pirates that were rumoured to stalk this place are now not an active threat. They are kind of off the table. I think they made a pretty good living picking off grubs on the kind of fringes, the outskirts of the spine. But then they got too greedy. And when they decided to go after the big prize themselves, this is what happened. This is what befell them. And I think that's what the progress represents. The fact that even though this place is remarkably hostile and terrifying, because like whatever did this to the ship is presumably still a going concern. It's probably still out there. The fact that we don't have to deal with the pirate ships on top of all this is something of a bonus. Okay, so is there anything specific that we want to learn here? Well, I think it makes perfect sense to perhaps try and learn a bit more about what could have done this and maybe figure out what happened to this ship. So I think the Eclipse is going to kind of move in real close, and I think we're going to fire up the searchlights and we are going to look for clues, kind of try and piece together what happened. And to do that, we are going to make the move, gather information. Gather information says, when you search for clues, conduct an investigation, analyse evidence, or do research, roll plus wits. Not only is that a miss, but that is a miss with a match. And they are double 10s on the challenge dice. I have been playing this campaign for more than a year, and I think this is the 37th episode of the campaign, and that is my first double 10s. Momentum cannot save me. This is just about as bad as it gets. So, on a miss, it says your investigation unearths a dire threat, great, or reveals an unwelcome truth that undermines your quest, pay the price. So, that is just peachy, is it not? In terms of paying the price, I think we will make the most negative outcome happen in the narrative. And narratively, what were we doing? We were coming to take a look at the damage, and I think the most obvious negative outcome is going to be coming face to face with what caused this damage, right? And that's going to have to be whatever it was that nearly got us back at the courier ship, right? That big thing, the big thing that we didn't see. We didn't establish anything about it because we didn't see it. Other than that it was big and bad news. And I think I actually said if it was a ship, it would be capital class. So that makes it like very, very big. So that's what we're going to have to kind of deal with, and that's what we're going to have to confront. So anyway, let's envision what's happening. The Eclipse is moving slowly around the remains of the pirate galleon, looking at what's left. And the frayed edges of the fuselage reveal the cross-section of the ship. Equipment and wreckage is kind of suspended in the area around the galleon, twisted beyond recognition. There's no life. There's no light inside. There's no bodies, nothing. Just half a ship, this husk hanging in space. And the crew are looking at this, kind of searching the wreckage. The spotlight is cutting through the gloom. And there's this silence that's fallen over the ship as they're almost kind of all holding their breath. And then it's suddenly punctured by a ping. A ping that's coming from the scanners. Cole looks down at it. There is something coming closer. It's some way off, but the scanners have picked it up. And it's big. Archer orders the eclipse be swung around to point in the direction of the incoming signal. The dust is thick, but nowhere near as bad as it was at the beacon. Visibility is limited, but they can see far enough. Okay, let's get some inspiration. Let's roll on the chaotic oracles and see what we can come up with. 14. 14 is chaotic portal, focus, or conduit. Shall I roll again? I think I rolled a miss for the match, so why not? So let's roll again. 79 says hazardous environmental changes. Shall I roll again? I mean, it was double tens. I think that's the least I can do. I think a miss with a match, if it's double tens, that's going to be 3 rolls. So, what else? 86. 86 is lifeform spawned from chaos. All right, we have got ourselves in some real danger here. So, I think the space everywhere, all around us, crackles with this greenish yellow lightning. And it envelops the eclipse and what's left of the pirate ship. And the screens in the cockpit glitch and flash, and the lights flicker on and off. And out in the distance, there is this concentration of the green-yellow energy, these billowing clouds of crackling light plume in the direction the signal is coming from. And there is something forcing its way through the clouds. So what is it? What is this thing? Now, I think I want to play on that role of life form spawned from chaos that we just rolled, but I would also like to keep going what we rolled when we first entered the spine, which was something like corrupted technology, that angle. The thing that morphed the face into that beacon. So to kind of fuse those together, I think what comes through the clouds, this chaotic portal, if you will, is a ship. Or it was a ship. The prow of this thing is narrow, long and tapered to a sharp point. And along the flanks of the prow are what appears to be rows of jagged, interlocking teeth. And it gives the front of this ship this almost crocodile-like appearance. And this is huge. But the bad news is, that is by no means all of it. And the crew of the Eclipse watch in horror as the full scale of this thing is revealed as it pushes slowly through the clouds. And they're kind of sort of down below it, several hundred meters away. And the distance doesn't seem all that much given the scale of this gargantuan thing. The hull that emerges is bulky and mechanical, but it is covered with these spiny, bony protrusions, these reptilian ridges, scaly textures running all along the fuselage. Windows morphed into twisted versions of dead black eyes, and 2 stubby wings have now somehow hinged like flippers on either side. As it comes fully out of the clouds, we see snaking behind the body of this thing a long, whip-like metal tail. And it certainly was a ship at some point, but the nightmarish energies of this place have corrupted it into something else entirely. And it kind of reminds me of one of those prehistoric leviathans of the deep. This monstrous thing now prowls the spine of Kronos, searching for prey, using these chaotic portals to cover vast distances. And it's here now, and the Eclipse is the prey. And it slowly turns its monstrous head towards the wreckage of the galleon and slowly begins to close the distance. So here's a question. Is the E-drive charged? Now, we haven't been here very long. So let's ask the Oracle. I think at best the odds are 50-50. What are you saying, Oracle? 67 is no. That's just great. So we can't jump into the drift and get away. And I think that Archer and the others are looking at the progress bar, this charge bar of the E-drive, and it's just blinking at them. And it's not even half full. And Cole says, "What are we going to do?" And Archer says, "It's okay. I've got a plan." And he moves over to the console and starts throwing switches and flicking levers and twiddling knobs and until the space around the eclipse crackles once again with greenish yellow lightning, this time wreathing the ship in jagged bolts of energy. The lights go out. The engines go quiet. And the cockpit is plunged into total darkness. The crew inside can only see the vast, ominous silhouette moving towards them through the dust. And Archer says, "Okay, new plan." Thank you a million times. Thank you for watching. Please like this video, subscribe if you've not done so already, and click the little bell icon so you can be notified as soon as the next video drops. I'll be back next week, but until then, it's farewell and safe passage.